Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you're doing well. Today's video is a review, 2 looks, and swatches of the new Canyon palette from Alter Ego. So this palette is a dupe for the Natasha Denona Bronze palette, which I will touch on later in the video. But before we get into the real content of this video, I just wanted to say a special welcome to anyone who's new to my channel. I hope you enjoy this video today, and if you do, I would love if you would consider subscribing before you go. Now let's go ahead and jump right into this review. So the order of operations for this video today is going to be swatches first. I do my live swatches in my studio lighting, and then I will also show you a short clip of what they look like in natural light as well. And then after the swatches, I'll move right into the 2 looks that I created with this palette. So one of them is the look that's on my eyes today, and another one that ironically I filmed in the exact same sweater, but just on a completely different day. That one is more kind of the classic bronzy tones that you might expect from a palette that looks like this. Finally, I will wrap up with product details, where you can purchase this, as well as pros and cons and my final thoughts on the palette as a whole. So let's go ahead and jump right into the swatches. Okay, and now I'm going to roll the footage of the 2 looks I created with this palette. And the first one is that more classic bronze, and the second one is the look I'm wearing now. Okay, so for look 1, I wanted to go really classic, kind of coppery vibes with this palette. So I'm starting out with the shade Rattlesnake in the crease. Just building up one more layer of Rattlesnake again in the crease. Now deepening and warming up that crease, as well as the lower lash line here with the shade Desert Sun. I'm adding the shade Mule here on the outer half of my lashes just to add a little more warmth and depth. Just blending that in a little and adding a tad bit more. I put that on my lower lash line as well. And then last up for the mattes here, I'm adding Russet in my furthest outer corner just for some added depth, and it's a really nice warm red shade. I put that on my lower lash line as well. Now going in with the shimmer shades, I'm putting the shade Blaze over top of where I placed Russet and Mule. Then with that same brush, I switched over to the shade Rust on the inner half. Last up, I went ahead and added just a pop of the shade Cougar in my inner corner. Here's the finished look with just mascara. And here's the finished look with the rest of my makeup on as well. For look number 2, I wanted to do something a little more cool toned, but I'm still starting with that same shade Rattlesnake in the crease. And I'm running that on my lower lash line as well. And then I knew I wanted to do some sort of kind of deep purpley halo eye with those two nice purple shades in the palette. So I went ahead and put the shade Expanse, which is the matte purple, on the inner and outer corners of my eye to build the base of that halo eye. And then I also, you'll see in a minute, put it on the outer half of my lower lash line. After I have the placement how I want it, I just blend the edges a little bit to make it less harsh. Once I have those mattes placed, I go ahead and put the shimmers over top. So here I'm putting Desert Moon over the top of the shade Expanse on the inner and outer corners. Then for the pop in the center, I'm using the shade Plateau. I also decided to add a little bit of the shade Sear in between Plateau and Desert Moon, and then I'm using Plateau here on the inner corner. Here's the look with mascara. And here's the look with the rest of my face done as well. And now I want to go ahead and move into product details, pros and cons, and my final thoughts on this palette. So this palette contains 15 shades and retails for $16. So just a tiny bit over that $1 per shadow price, which I think is a really, really good price for the quality that's in here. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second when I talk about the pros and cons. I do want to address kind of the elephant in the room with the fact that Alter Ego is a dupe brand. So this palette is very, very intentionally supposed to dupe the Natasha Denona Bronze palette. So I'll give you another look at this, and then on the screen here, I will pop a side-by-side picture of the Natasha Denona and the Alter Ego, just so you can see how similar they are. I have kind of my thoughts on kind of dupe or mimic brands like Alter Ego, and everyone is going to have a different opinion on this. So if you just absolutely hate the idea that Alter Ego essentially took Natasha Denona's successful color story, created new formulas, and repackaged it as their own, then of course this is not going to be the palette for you. But for someone like me who really values budgeting my money and making sure that I'm spending my money wisely on things like makeup, as well as for someone like me who has been lusting after the bronze palette for a while now. I actually just talked about that in a video that I'll link up in the corner, where I talk about 10 palettes that I still really, really wish I owned, even though they were released quite a while ago. So this is a color story that has intrigued me for a long time now. And when an opportunity came up to get this palette very gently used from a different YouTuber. Her name is Sally Choi, and she was decluttering her collection, and she had only ever swatched this palette. She never used it on her eyes, and so she decided to sell it and donate the money from the sale to her local food bank. So I was in a little bit of a moral conundrum, because I don't love the idea of Alter Ego taking this idea that was so successful for another brand and essentially just copying it at a lower price point. But as a consumer, I really appreciate the chance to get this palette for a lower price tag. And then in my particular situation, I also contributed something to a community in need. So I decided to go ahead and purchase the palette because it's going to give me a good sense of whether or not I love this color story as much as I was hoping, and if it would be a good idea to then go ahead and purchase the full Natasha Denona version in order to compare and contrast and really have that high quality experience if it is something I love. And if it's not something I love, then I didn't waste $65 on a palette, or I didn't return a $65 palette after using it once and realizing it's not what I wanted. So I really think it's a toss-up, and that's totally going to come down to your own personal preferences and how you feel about dupe brands. But I am really, really happy that I purchased this. And that brings us to the pros of the pros and cons list that I made for this palette. So first off, I think the formulas in here are outstanding. So the matte and the shimmer formulas worked great. You saw in the 2 looks that I did that I tested out the shimmers with both a brush and my finger, and they worked flawlessly with both of them without even wetting them. So I can't even imagine if I were to spray them and then apply them, how foiled and beautiful and shiny they would be. The mattes blended out really well. I do feel like I had to maybe dip into them a couple more times than I have to with some of my higher end or more pigmented formulas. But the benefit of that is that they're super user-friendly and it's hard to over-apply. I was pleasantly surprised that I got no fallout from any of the shades that I've tried. And I've tried almost all of them. I think I haven't tried Cliff, this more gold one in the middle, just because it's not a shade I really love. And I also actually haven't used Scorch either. So Scorch and Cliff I can't speak to, but the others I had no fallout. I was also pleasantly surprised to see that I was able to get a lot of variety out of this palette. I think the 2 looks I created are completely different, and I think that that variety is owed in large part to these 2 purple shades, but also to this shade here called Plateau, which is like a peachy gold shift, and it just has kind of a different feel than the rest of these shades. I feel like one of the biggest complaints I heard time and time again in reviews of the Natasha Denona Bronze is that there was no variety and every look came out exactly the same. And that concerned me a little bit when it's at that $65 price tag, but I'm glad to report that after playing with this quite a bit, I've now used it maybe like 4 or 5 times. So I recorded 2 of those, but I've done a few others. I think you can actually get a ton of different looks out of this, and I wasn't expecting that much versatility. Selfishly, because I have blue eyes and coppers and bronzes really complement those, I love this palette because it will look good with my particular facial features. So I'm not sure how this would look with green or brown eyes, just because I don't have experience with that. But I will say if you have blue eyes, this will look stunning every time. I think the price is a huge pro. Like I said, it's almost $1 per shadow, which is really hard to beat even with other affordable brands on the market. And I love their packaging. This is an absolutely gorgeous, like soft touch matte on the outside, and it's really well constructed. You get a huge mirror on the inside, which, yes, that makes it less sustainable and means that you can't, recycle this packaging when you're done with it. But it's really nice for travel, and it's a huge mirror, so you can actually use it. So I really do think that for $16, you're getting an amazing value. The shadows performed well, and the packaging feels much more expensive than that. Now onto the cons, or the drawbacks. One of these is something that I already mentioned, the fact that this is duping another brand's hard work doesn't always sit super well with me. I don't love the feeling of kind of contributing to that, but I also want to acknowledge that not everyone has $65 to drop on an eyeshadow palette, and that if it was someone's dream to own the bronze palette from Natasha Denona, Alter Ego has made that a possibility for a much wider audience. So I suppose that's a pro and a con depending how you look at it. But the other cons are a little more significant, I think. First of all, I have never owned anything else from Alter Ego, but I've always heard that one of the things people love about their palettes is that the pans are removable. So you can actually, take these out, rearrange them however you want. But this palette, they are not removable. So they're stuck in there. You can't kind of rearrange and get creative and take them out and use them with your single shadow collection. And to me, that was a bummer. I kind of expected that I was going to be able to do that because I've heard that people love that about past Alter Ego palettes. So I was a little bit bummed. Also, I know that Alter Ego was just directly duping Natasha Denona here. They were not trying to do like a color story inspired by the bronze palette or anything just that's similar. They were trying to do the exact same thing. But I almost feel like they missed a market opportunity here because the bronze palette got so much feedback that there was redundancy within the shades in the palette that I feel like Alter Ego could have said, here's our version of Natasha Denona Bronze, and we did you one better. We took out all the shades that kind of dupe themselves, so you still get the same overall effect with our palette, but with fewer shades and in a more compact format. So for example, I think they could have taken out either Earth or Desert Sun. I think that Russet and Mule are in the exact same color family, and if you took out Mule, you could still get that exact shade by mixing Rattlesnake and Russet. So, you don't really need that. And then I also think that they could have just more well curated the shimmers slightly, and they could have almost done like one better version of the bronze palette and kind of taken customer feedback into account when they were building this. Of course, that's not like an actual con, that's just like a, I wonder why they didn't do something like that. Although I do get it, they're just a direct-to-dupe brand, so they're not exactly trying to come up with something new and creative. They really are just trying to copy the exact product. Now, that being said, although I'd want them to remove some shadows to reduce redundancy, I would want them to add one shadow in particular, and that is some sort of inner corner highlight shade for skin tones like mine. So especially in the winter time, like this time of year, I'm extremely pale, and even the shades that look fairly light in here are a little too deep to be like a brow bone highlight or an inner corner highlight for me personally. And I love the deeper, kind of warmer tones of the rest of this palette, but I really think that having one lighter shade would be awesome. So you can see today I have Plateau on my inner corner, and when I'm facing forward, it actually creates kind of a shadow because it's just a little too deep of a base pigment for my skin tone. On the other look I did, I had Cougar on the inner corner, and same story. It's just a little bit too deep of a base for pale skin tones to use it as a highlighting shade. But aside from those cons, which are kind of just me more picking on the Natasha Denona color story, in all honesty, I'm really happy with this palette. And in all honesty, it has increased my desire to have the Natasha Denona palette because I want to know side by side if the Natasha formula is really so much better than the Alter Ego formula to be worth the extra $50 that it costs. Listen, I know Natasha Denona has an amazing formula. It's absolutely stunning, but that doesn't always mean it's worth 50 bucks more. Like literally 5 times the price of this Alter Ego palette. So I am curious, but now that I have this, it has kind of scratched the itch for me. So I'm not sure that I'd be willing to drop the 65 bucks on it at this point because I'm unbelievably happy with this palette that I have, and I don't want to just have the exact same thing in my collection twice. So basically what I'm saying is this palette has torn me up more than I was already about the bronze palette, because now it has piqued my curiosity in comparing the formulas, but it has also made me feel like, well, I've got it right here and it's incredible. It's truly amazing. So why buy another version? So that is it. Those are my thoughts on the Canyon palette from Alter Ego. I hope you enjoyed this video today, and if you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up down below, leaving a comment to let me know if you're going to pick up either the Natasha Denona Bronze or the Alter Ego Canyon palette, and why. Or if you have both, I'd love to hear your thoughts and comparisons between the two. I also hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel before you go today if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.